We tend to treat holidays like they're just, well, fixed dates on a calendar, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a
Well,
day off work or a big family meal.
right, maybe some pastel decorations. But if you actually crack one open, you don't find a neat, tidy tradition at all.
No, not even close.
You find this, I mean, it's basically a time capsule holding this incredible, chaotic mix of ancient mathematics, repackaged pagan rituals, and literal imperial propaganda.
And that's because we've scrubbed all the context away over the centuries, you know? A holiday of that magnitude is never just a single religious observance. It's a massive accumulation of human history.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive today. We're going to transport you, the listener, back in time to build a really comprehensive general picture of the ultimate historical focal point of the year, which is Easter in the Byzantine Empire.
Great.
And we're pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources for this. We've got historical analyses of Byzantine daily life, detailed breakdowns of ancient liturgical manuscripts like the 11th century Dresden A104.
That one is fascinating.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we're looking at articles tracing the origins of all these traditions. So we aren't just looking at a standard Sunday church service here. We are diving into a massive sensory, civic, and spiritual extravaganza.
It completely consumed Constantinople. And to even begin to understand the sheer scale of it, we really have to look at the invitation, so to speak. We have to understand the intense obsession the early church had with getting the exact date right.
Right, because Easter, unlike Christmas, is a movable feast. It wanders.
Exactly. It's not locked in. And the mechanism for deciding where it lands is just mind-boggling. They were tying it directly to the cosmos.
The rule was that Easter had to be celebrated on the first Sunday after the Paschal full moon, right?
Yes, which was a massive political and, frankly, theological headache. The early Christian church viewed it as an absolute existential imperative to sever their dependency on the Hebrew calendar.
Because that historically dictated the timing of Passover.
Right. They wanted their own distinct timeline. But breaking away from that established calendar meant they had to calculate this new wandering date entirely in advance. And that required mathematically syncing lunar months with the solar year. This was called the Computus Paschalis.
And anyone who has, briefly looked at a calendar knows those two things simply refuse to line up smoothly.
Oh, they fight each other. A lunar year is shorter, so you end up with these leftover days, right? The intercalary days, or epochs.
So to force the math to work, so the holiday didn't just accidentally drift into the middle of winter, the Byzantine church utilized the 19-year Metonic cycle.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is. They were essentially doing hardcore speculative orbital mechanics, just figuring out exactly when to inject extra lunar months over a nearly two-decade period, just to assert their theological independence.
It was basically the ancient equivalent of an Apollo mission, but driven entirely by theology. But, the obsession with keeping this holiday anchored to that spring equinox window wasn't just about separating from the Hebrew calendar.
All right, there were deeper echoes there.
Exactly. It was about capturing the ancient echoes of antiquity. Because long before the Byzantine Empire, that exact cosmic timing was already heavily occupied by powerful spring rebirth festivals.
Oh, the overlap is just impossible to ignore. I mean, if you look at the Minoans in Crete, right around that exact same spring equinox, they were holding massive rituals.
Celebrating the rebirth of nature.
Yeah, dedicating the first crops to a great mother goddess. Or take the lesser Eleusinian mysteries in ancient Greece. That entire festival centered on Demeter and Persephone.
Right. Persephone goes to the underworld. The earth dies in winter. She returns. The earth resurrects in spring.
And then you have the Adonia festival.
Oh, which was heavily celebrated all across the Eastern Mediterranean.
This is the one that really gets me. So during the Adonia festival, women would actually take a funeral bier, like a physical bed for this pagan figure, Adonis, and they would decorate it heavily with flowers and greenery.
Right, and sing public laments over it.
Exactly. And then the very next day, they would celebrate his resurrection. I mean, that is a direct, undeniable parallel to what Orthodox Christians do on Good Friday, right?
So,
Decorating the epitaphios, the symbolic tomb of Christ.
the visual continuity there is just striking.
But, okay, here's my question. I look at this and I see a new operating system running on legacy hardware. Did the early church really just paste Easter over these deeply entrenched pagan spring festivals?
I see why you'd think that.
Because it feels a little too convenient, You'd think there would be massive internal pushback among the clergy against women decorating Christ's burial bier the exact same way they used to decorate the funeral bed of Adonis.
Well, I would caution against calling it a simple copy-paste job. It was significantly messier and much more deliberate than that.
How so?
The church wasn't just blindly overwriting a file. They were attempting to completely rewire human psychology. You simply cannot eradicate the fundamental human need to celebrate the victory of life over death when the snow melts.
Right, it's just baked into us.
Yeah, exactly. That desire to visually and physically participate in the rebirth of nature is hardwired into our biology. So you redirect the emotional current.
Ah, so if you can't beat the instinct, you hijack the mechanism.
Precisely. The early theologians realized that establishing a new religion across a vast empire becomes vastly easier if you maintain the physical grammar of worship that people already know.
That makes total sense.
The why changed entirely. It was now centered on the bodily resurrection of Jesus rather than the agricultural cycle of Adonis, but the how remained beautifully intact. The mourning, the flowers, the visceral celebration of spring.
Okay, so you had this mathematically precise, psychologically complex cosmic holiday locked into the calendar. Let's look at what that actually looks like if you, the listener, are standing in the middle of Constantinople in the 11th century.
Oh, it's a completely different vibe.
Yeah, because the energy completely shifts from the cosmos to the streets, right? We transition to the civic side.
And the city essentially underwent a total civic shutdown. Easter wasn't just a single day. It was a mandated week-long celebration.
Officially called the Dia Kainissimos week, right?
Yes. Though the common citizens just called it Lamproskola, which means the break week.
And all the courts were closed. And there was this really fascinating tradition where prisoners who had committed late crimes were granted royal pardons and just walked free.
It functioned as a massive societal pressure valve. The empire basically mandated a week of grace.
Which is wild.
It really is. In fact, contemporary legal records show that when citizens were locked in bitter disputes, it was common practice to declare, "Let the day of Christ's passion pass, and I avenge the insult."
Huh. Like, I am legally and spiritually obligated to tolerate you this week, but I will absolutely ruin your life next Tuesday.
Exactly. The grace period had a very strict expiration date. But during that brief window of mandated peace, the state funded incredible public spectacles.
Like the Hippodrome.
Oh, the Hippodrome would be packed. Massive horse races were held, which were the absolute pinnacle of civic entertainment and political gathering in Constantinople.
And while the masses are, screaming at the chariot races, the emperor is utilizing the holiday for a completely different purpose indoors. He's hosting these staggering banquets in the Chrysotraklinos.
The Golden Hall of the Great Palace.
Right. And just imagine the sheer geopolitical weight of that room. You have the Byzantine military elite, high-ranking politicians, and critically, foreign ambassadors from places like the Kievan Rus or the Frankish kingdoms.
All dressed up in their national garments.
Yeah, and they're seated at a massive solid gold table. And right there in the room is this towering five-towered cabinet called the Pentaprogyn.
Oh, yes.
And sitting out on display inside it are the imperial crowns and the state jewels. I mean, it is just an unvarnished flex of unimaginable wealth.
Well, Easter was the perfect weapon of statecraft. You invite these foreign dignitaries to celebrate the resurrection, but you make sure they spend the entire evening just staring at unattainable wealth and power.
Send them home intimidated.
Thoroughly intimidated. But the beauty of the Byzantine Easter is that it wasn't just for the ultra-wealthy. Amidst all that imperial intimidation, everyday citizens were participating in traditions that you can still see today.
Right. The material culture of the holiday was incredibly rich for the commoners, too. Take the Lampriatica.
Yes.
It was customary for godparents to buy their godchildren new, bright clothes specifically for this week. And you see the exact same thing today with kids getting new Easter outfits.
And then, of course, the food.
Oh, the food. You have the sweetbreads and the famous red dyed eggs.
The red dye heavily symbolized the blood of Christ. But the tradition goes far beyond just, boiling and coloring an egg. You have the game of Sigrisma.
Right, where you take your red egg and smash it against someone else's egg to see whose shell cracks first.
Exactly.
It's a fun family game now, but the symbolism they attached to it was intense. The chick breaking the shell was viewed as a physical mirror to Christ, shattering the physical bonds of the tomb.
And if we pull back even further, that symbolism taps right back into that ancient legacy hardware we discussed earlier. The egg has been a powerful emblem of the cosmos and the mystery of creation long before the Byzantine era.
Right. The ancient Greeks viewed the egg as sacred to Asclepius, the god of healing and medicine.
And the Romans were deeply attached to the symbolism as well. They routinely incorporated eggs into their funerary meals, and archaeologists constantly find eggshells deliberately placed inside ancient Roman tombs.
Wow. So when a Byzantine citizen, or honestly someone today, cracks a red egg, they're actively participating in an unbroken chain of human symbolism regarding life conquering death.
That stretches directly back through imperial banquet halls into ancient Mediterranean gravesites. It's
We
amazing.
really start to see the layers.
Hmm.
The citizens are feasting, the emperor is intimidating ambassadors with his crowns, families are cracking eggs. But if you step outside the palace gates, the atmosphere takes a drastic turn.
It does.
To understand the spiritual heartbeat of the empire, you have to look at the latte, the massive supplicatory processions winding through the capital. Let's transition to the intense sensory experience of the worship.
Because the scale of these processions is just hard to overstate. Detailed liturgical maps from manuscripts like that 11th century Dresden A104 you mentioned,
Yeah.
they show that these weren't just short strolls around a church courtyard. The clergy and the citizens would march up to 10 kilometers across the city, strategically linking various holy sites and major forums.
Imagine you're standing in the street as this approaches. The sensory immersion is total. The streets themselves were heavily swept clean and laid thick with boxwood sawdust, fresh ivy, myrtle, and rosemary.
The sheer friction of thousands of people walking over those crushed herbs would release an intense earthy perfume into the air. And then that, mixed with the heavy narcotic scent of spikenard and burning frankincense swinging from the censers. And since these processions often moved in the pre-dawn hours or late into the evening, the entire city was bathed in the flickering, undulating light of massive processional torches.
And right in the middle of this fragrant smoke and chanting, you get this incredible theater of social hierarchy.
Oh, the decorum was rigidly orchestrated.
Yeah, you might see the emperor, arguably the most powerful man on the planet at that time, walking the 10 kilometers completely barefoot as a public, highly visible act of penance.
It was a very calculated display of humility. Meanwhile, the patriarch, the supreme head of the church, would ride through the crowds on a donkey.
Which is a deliberate, undeniable visual callback to Christ's entry into Jerusalem.
Exactly. It's a living, moving theater.
Right, the emperor strips away his shoes to show submission to God, while the patriarch rides the beast of burden to assert spiritual authority.
And that profound theatricality didn't suddenly stop when the procession finally arrived at the massive bronze doors of Hagia Sophia. In fact, it escalated.
Really?
Yes. If you read the detailed commentaries written by Patriarch Germanus regarding the liturgy, specifically the segment known as the Great Entrance, you realize very quickly that this was not a quiet, contemplative reading of Scripture.
I noticed that in the sources. Germanus's writings literally read like stage directions for a dramatic play.
That's exactly what it was.
The altar itself wasn't just a table. It physically represented the tomb of Christ in the narrative of the service.
Right, and this extreme literalism was driven by what theologians refer to as Antiochene theology. Unlike the church in Alexandria, which loved abstract allegory and hidden spiritual meanings, the Antiochene tradition favored literal historical reality.
Ah.
They believed the liturgy needed to be a visceral, spatial reenactment of the passion and the burial.
So they basically mapped the entire funeral onto the sanctuary. Like the massive embroidered veil they used to cover the communion vessels that represented the heavy physical stone that was rolled over the entrance to the tomb.
And the golden plate holding the bread, was viewed as the literal hands of Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, gently laying the body to rest.
Wow. So the priests aren't just reciting a narrative, they're actively playing the roles of the burial party in real time.
Yes, and you have to view this through the lens of a society that didn't have mass literacy. You couldn't just hand everyone a book and ask them to reflect on the theology. The theology had to be visual. It had to occupy physical space.
Right, they had to see it.
By reenacting the burial with such meticulous spatial precision, the clergy were essentially turning the entire congregation into physical eyewitnesses. The crushing sensory weight of the street procession culminated in the dramatic, quiet tension of a literal burial happening right in front of them in the sanctuary.
But of course, the tension of that burial gives way to the ultimate climax of the holiday. The entire agonizing buildup of the fast, the math, the processions, and the burial theater pivots to the victory of the resurrection.
Exactly.
And to understand how the Byzantines visualized that victory, We have to look at their artistic theology.
Specifically, the Anastasis icon, often referred to in Western traditions as the descent into Hades.
Yes, and the contrast between the Western and Eastern depictions of this moment is staggering. I mean, if you look at Western Renaissance art, the resurrection is usually Jesus looking very serene.
Floating gracefully out of a tomb.
Right, maybe holding a little white banner. It's very quiet. But the Byzantine Anastasis icon is incredibly violent.
Oh, it is entirely devoid of serenity. He isn't waking up in a garden. He is actively invading the realm of the dead.
The visual language is purely imperial. It looks exactly like a Byzantine emperor violently suppressing a rebellion and kicking down the gates of a conquered city. Christ is standing on these massive shattered bronze doors that are crossed over one another in the abyss.
And if you look closely beneath those shattered doors into the black void of Hades, you usually see hundreds of scattered broken locks, keys, and chains.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes you even see the personification of Hades himself bound and gagged in the dark. It is a dynamic image of total conquest and rescue.
And the theological details embedded in this image are just phenomenal. Take Christ's halo, for example. It's not the standard golden disc you see behind regular saints. Inside the gold circle, there's a cross.
Right.
And inscribed on the arms of that cross are 3 specific Greek letters, Omega, Omicron, and Nu, which translates to the phrase, he who is.
Go on. The inclusion of that specific phrase is a massive theological mic drop.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, he who is the exact name that God revealed to Moses at the burning bush in the book of Exodus. Yeah. By stamping those letters into Christ's halo at the exact moment he obliterates the gates of the underworld, the Byzantine artist is making an explicit, unbending claim. The man conquering death is simultaneously the eternal, uncreated God of the Old Testament.
That is incredible. And speaking of the Old Testament, the crowd of people standing in the dark, waiting to be rescued by him, is incredibly specific too.
Yes, it is.
On one side, you have the kings, David and Solomon, but right near the front, you always find Moses, who's easily identifiable because he's wearing a distinct Phrygian cap.
The presence of Moses is vital there. Moses represents the Old Covenant. He was the primary human witness to the very first Passover in Egypt, where the blood on the doorposts saved the Israelites from death. In this icon, he's standing in Hades, watching the ultimate cosmic Passover unfold right in front of him.
Oh, that's such a great parallel. But the figure that fascinates me the most is usually standing right behind Adam. It's a young boy holding a shepherd's staff.
Yes.
Without knowing the context, you'd gloss right over him. But that boy is Abel, from the story of Cain and Abel.
And the inclusion of Abel is the key to understanding the sheer scale of the Byzantine theology of resurrection.
Well, why is he at the front of the line?
Because Abel was the absolute first human being to ever suffer injustice and violent death as a consequence of humanity's fall. He is the original victim.
So when Christ reaches down and pulls Abel out of the grave, he isn't just saving a random soul. He's reaching all the way back to the very first tragedy. He's snapping the cycle of death directly at its origin point.
It represents the complete and total reversal of human history. The disease of death is eradicated, starting with patient 0.
Man, that is powerful. Before we wrap up the visual theology, though, there's a fascinating linguistic artifact regarding the word anastasis itself that often confuses modern viewers looking at these icons.
Oh, well, the spelling issue.
Yeah. Some people look at the Greek text written above Christ and they ask, wait, is it spelled anatasic? Because they look at the letters and clearly see a C.
It's a brilliant little trap for modern historians. What they're actually seeing is the lunate sigma.
Right.
In medieval Greek script, the letter sigma, which makes the S sound, was frequently drawn in a crescent shape that looks perfectly identical to the modern English letter C.
So the word is spelled Anastasis, anastasis, meaning resurrection. But a visual glitch in the transcription makes it look like it ends in CIC.
Precisely. If you attempt to pronounce it with a hard English C, you end up with anatakic, which is meaningless. It's just an 11th century paleographic quirk causing a 21st century headache.
I love how the deeper you look, the more complex the layers get. Well, let's pull ourselves out of the underworld, away from the golden halls of Constantinople, and back into the present day.
Okay.
If we look at the general picture we just painted of the Byzantine Easter, It's staggering.
It really is. I mean, we started with the sheer intellectual obsession of the Computus Paschalis, doing massive mathematical gymnastics just to declare chronological independence.
We looked at the messy, deliberate psychological rewiring of ancient Minoan and Greek harvest rituals, redirecting the human need for spraying into a new theological narrative.
We witnessed a sprawling capital city completely shut down for a week, light crime prisoners walking free as a civic pressure valve.
Right. While the emperor engaged in high-stakes geopolitical intimidation in the Chrysotriclinos, forcing foreign ambassadors to dine next to his crowns.
We smelled the crushed myrtle and the burning frankincense as the emperor walked barefoot for 10 kilometers. We watched priests turn the altar of Hagia Sophia into a literal theater of burial.
And we decoded the violent imperial theology of the Anastasis icon, where the god of the burning bush kicks down the bronze doors of Hades to rescue the very first victim of death. It's just an unbelievably dense tapestry of human experience.
It truly is.
And the true magic of this deep dive is realizing that this history is not trapped in a manuscript in a museum.
No, it's a living, breathing continuity.
Exactly. When you see a red Easter egg today, or you watch a family laugh while cracking them in a game of Sugrisma, when you see a kid wearing a brand new outfit gifted by their godparents, or you smell incense burning on a spring morning, you aren't just doing a fun family tradition.
You're actively plugging into an unbroken cultural electrical cord.
Yes, you're linking yourself directly through the heart of the Byzantine Empire, right back to the tombs of antiquity.
You are utilizing that legacy hardware, aligning your present emotional rhythms with the exact same physical rhythms that humans have relied on for thousands of years.
It fundamentally changes how you look at a long holiday weekend. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on.
Go for it.
Throughout this entire exploration, we've seen how the Byzantines didn't just passively remember their past. Through their obsessive calendar calculations to align with the cosmos and their intense, visceral liturgical reenactments, they truly believed they were making the past physically manifest in their current reality.
For them, the burial and the resurrection weren't historical trivia that happened back then. By participating in the liturgy, the events were happening right now, in that very room. They were collapsing time.
So my question for you is this. In our highly digital, aggressively fast-paced modern world, where every moment is instantly recorded, digitized, and immediately archived as the past, do we have any celebrations left that attempt to completely collapse time the way the Byzantine Easter did?
That's a great question.
Do we still know how to make ancient history feel like it is unfolding right in front of us? Or have our holidays just devolved into fixed, static dates on a calendar? A closed time capsule, just waiting for someone curious enough to finally crack it open?